Am I good? All right. Hi, folks. Welcome to our second and final installment of Inquisitive Sips for Anarchist Wine Co. for the 2020 vintage. 2020 vintage has shifted from harvesting and fermentation to pressing and aging, and kind of the mechanics of that on the press, as well as we got somebody not on mute on there, one of my colleagues. But we're going to be talking about the mechanics of the press, and also getting into kind of the tail end. You know, we finished fermentation on the last episode, and we're going to pick right up where we left off from that in a little bit. So as Stu mentioned in our kind of prelude, we've got the great debate for you tonight, which is going to be our 2019 Rosé Against the Machine and the 2016 Conspiracy Theory. Which one will win? Which one will have the final say? Which one will speak louder? I think it's going to be the Rosé, in my opinion, right now, because it's still warm here in Napa. It's about 80 degrees outside and beautifully sunny. So tonight we're going to focus on four pieces: extended maceration, that's red wines still in tank on the skins; pressing, malolactic fermentation, and aging in oak. So we're going to give you kind of a crash course here and how we explore the different components of the rosé. Stu's going to go to the 2020 Rosé Against the Machine, which is in tank right now in a minute or two. And then we're going to be working with one of the components of the conspiracy theory. You can probably see on your screen, especially if you're on gallery view, that we've got a treat. We have our director of winemaking, Patrick Sabo, joining us here tonight, mainly because his mom watches these back in record, and she was tired of seeing just Stuart and myself. So we've got her baby boy on the screen tonight, so hopefully she's watching. And quick shout out to Delcy. I see you're on there. Hi, Delcy. Nice to see you. All right, so first let's get into it. We're going to taste the 2019 Rosé Against the Machine, and this is 84% Tempranillo, 15% Mourvèdre, 1% Pinot Noir. The appellation for this is Clarksburg, which is up by the Sacramento Delta. And that's where our Tempranillo and Mourvèdre's from. The Pinot Noir, it's just a little kiss of Pinot Noir since it's 1%. That's from Sonoma Coast, from a vineyard we source from called Rogers Creek. It's what we call a whole cluster pressed rosé. And that means that we take the grapes as is when they come in, dump them in the press, which you'll get into in a little bit. And we just squeeze all the juice out of it, move those skins aside, and maybe make a second use out of them. But the juice, then we go into tank and we ferment it. And make the delicious wine. So this one here, you know, this needs to last us for another little bit. It's still got big legs because our 2020 won't be released until probably, you know, mid-spring or so. But this still has kind of watermelon, guava, a little passion fruit on the nose. It's what I love about rosé, and I drink it all year long myself. But I think it'll be interesting as we kind of talk through this with Stu. So anybody that's on there, if you're drinking this wine, feel free to throw in on the chat function what you're tasting. And also one more reminder on the questions, make sure to put them in the Q&A, because we've got a whole team kind of operating these harvest crush camps with us. And we have camera people here working from our staff. And then we've got some other people that are copying the questions and texting them into us here at the winery. So Q&A for questions. And Stu, are you over at the tank there for the 2020 Tempranillo Mourvèdre?
I am, with a cast of thousands. So at home, you're tasting the 2019, and right behind me in this stainless steel tank, we have the 2020 interpretation. And we've already kind of assembled a base wine of about 80% Tempranillo and 20% Mourvèdre. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the 2020 so you can see that wine. So we have a little valve right here. We call it a cheater valve because I'm going to cheat by pulling it off. And as soon as I pull some into the wine, the first thing you're going to notice is how turbid it is, because the wine is not done yet. So what's happening is there's still yeast, even though primary fermentation for all intents is complete, there's still some yeast and there's still a bunch of particulates in here, which are helping build body and give us complexity. Eventually what's going to happen is all this particulate, all of these solids are going to precipitate to the bottom of the tank, and then we will have a clarified interpretation of the rosé. But we don't need that right now because we're not going to assemble the final blend, and we're not going to approach bottling until maybe February. But I am going to pour a little bit of this 80%, the base wine, 80% of Tempranillo and 20% of Mourvedre into the glass. And if we have a centrifuge here at the winery, and if I spun out all of these particulates, the aromatics would be screaming. But even so, even though there's this kind of like a muffler on here, the aromatics are still exploding and getting a lot of kind of like a ruby red element, like a grapefruit element, and then some bright berries. We harvested this on September 2nd. So we're just about 6 weeks in to the process. Clearly a baby. Why stainless steel? Because we want this wine to be really focused and clean and just very light and kind of laser-like focus on the palate. A little bit later, Patrick and I will go into the barrel room and we'll talk about why we use barrels and the impact of that on aroma, flavor, and structure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shift gears just a little bit right now. While you're tasting your 2019 rosé at home, we're going to begin about conspiracy theory. Patrick is at he's at a tank which has one of the components of conspiracy theory, and he is trying to determine when to press that wine. So we're going to talk about something called extended maceration. Patrick, can you kind of reveal hows, whys, whens of this thing called extended maceration?
Yes, Stuart. You know, one of the most important decisions to make in the wine's life is to know when to press, when to pick and when to press. When to pick the grapes, you can't go back once you pick the grapes. And once we've pressed off the wine from the skins, we can't go back to that. So it's a really important decision to make. So I take it very seriously, and you have to taste regularly, of course. Make sure you know when you feel you've gained everything you can get out of the skins. And so what extended maceration is post-primary fermentation. Now we have alcohol in here. We have heat. And so the skins are still on still in there with the wine. It's because now we have 14% alcohol in there. We're extracting more of the tannins from the skins themselves. So what we're looking for early on in the fermentation, the wine is more on the front and sides of the palate. It is up front, and the wine doesn't seem very far back in the palate. So with more time on the skins, though, it allows the tannins to join together and form these larger chain particles that really affect the sides and the back of your palate more so. And so the question is when to press. And so it's a matter of with enough extraction, we'll be able to gain the kind of tannin profile and structure that we're looking for in the wine. And so it only happens with time. And so each day it gets a little closer. So you have to keep checking and deciding and projecting on how much of this tannins you're looking for in the final wine and how much, because what happens is early on, you're getting a lot of the fruit tannins and the skin tannins, and the wine is very chewy and fairly plush. But what happens over time is a lot of these things mellow and they fall out a little bit in the wine. So we want to have a little bit more than what we want up front, so that by the time we barrel age and get through all the aging, then we're stuck with the profile of the wine that we're looking for. So that only comes with experience, having done it a number of times, decide when something's ready to take off the grill or out of the oven or off the skins, if you will. So it's a matter of trying it over and over and over and over again and learning through your experiments how and when to do it. And so let's taste it together and we'll see what we think. So it's been on the skins now for about 3 weeks or so at this point. So I'm thinking that it's close, but I need to decide when to press. I'm getting really nice tannins, but it's still more kind of front and middle of the palate. I feel like it needs another 4 to 5 days or so at this temperature. So we're about low 80 degrees of this. So we're going to continue to gas the headspace and keep the wine fresh. But I don't want to go too long on the skins, because what happens is you can gain more and more bitterness on the skin. So at some point, you actually overstay your welcome. And so I don't want to get there. And so it's a matter of, again, tasting and projecting outward. And so at this point, I'm still thinking, based on today's taste, that maybe early next week. It's Thursday, so maybe Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. But I'll be tasting it each day and fine-tuning my opinion on when that needs to press. So it's a matter of choosing the right time, and it's very critical, because again, you can't go back. So, but at that point, now once we're ready, I say, okay, now it's time to press. And so what happens is we drain all the free run off. The free run is the unpressed wine. So we hook up hoses to the valve, and we drain out the free run, and then we go in there and we scoop out the pumice. The grapes go in and they're called must, but they come out as pumice. Don't ask me, the French came up with that, so I didn't decide those words. But so the pumice is then, there's about 10 to 15% of the total wine is the pressed fraction, as we refer to it. And so we're going to go over to Stu, is over the press, who's going to fill us in on what happens next when we go into the press. Stu, are you there?
Hey, Stu.
Patrick,
Hey, Stu, real quick.
Yep.
Stu, we have a question real quick, and I think I'm going to jump in because I think Patrick can jump to it while he's on this section. But Donna in Verde, Nevada is asking why we have rectangular tanks. She says, "quote I've never seen rectangular tanks." Patrick, do you want to crush that one?
Yeah, that's a great question, thank you so much. You know, the rectangular tanks are, I think, an amazing invention, if you will. Now, inside the tanks, they're not actually right angles. They're actually rounded corners. So you don't want to have any 90-degree angles when you have, because that's where bacteria and microbes could live inside there. But inside, they're rounded out. On the outside, they're rectangular. And the reason for that is to fit about 29% more tanks in the same space that we would if they were all cylindrical. And so that's a huge savings of real estate, particularly. It allows us to fit more tanks in here in order to make the amount of wine and utilize the space in the most efficient way possible. So real estate, as you know, is very expensive in California, particularly wine country. And so these tanks are, if you will, state-of-the-art tanks. They're kind of auto tanks. You can kind of see these tanks are hooked up. If you, I don't know, Philip, are you able to see the in on this? These tanks, if you see their valves and the hoses that are hooked up to there's a pump that's welded to the bottom of the tank. And so this can do auto pump overs on this tank. So on my phone or on the computer, I can be off-site or on-site and determine and do a pump over on this. And so taking wine or juice from the bottom of the tank and popping it up over into the top of the tank. So, which is very important throughout the fermentation. Now that we're in extended maceration, it's not necessary and longer, but this is critical because we have, you know, dozens and dozens of tanks going at the same time. So this is a valuable tool to use in that. So the square tanks, though, going back to, allows us to be able to utilize our space. So it's critical that we do that and to maintain a good workflow and overall profit margin that helps us to maintain our business for sure. So good question.
There's one more question that I'm going to kick to Patrick again because it's good to have the expert on here. Phil down in Mill Valley is asking if there's any problem or risk to doing a multiple month, like a 3 or 4 month extended maceration.
Yes, also a very good question. And there's definitely a little bit of a risk for sure, because what happens is once the yeast has eaten all the sugars, and now there's less activity in there, there's less CO2 in the headspace. So all wine is on its way to becoming vinegar. We're just drinking it before it happens, right? And we want to maintain a healthy and viable, I guess, product. And so it's critical that and you can, as I mentioned, you can overstay your welcome on the skin. Now you can do an extended maceration for many weeks, and oftentimes that might benefit a wine depending on the style you're looking for. I'd say 3 to 4 months is a fairly aggressive amount of time to do that. So it's a bit risky. I don't like to take chances that I don't feel that the upsides reward the risk. And so in this case, I'd say the risk isn't worth it. And so I think normally 2, 3, 4 weeks is plenty of time post-fermentation to extract everything you're trying to get out of the skin. That being said, there are a lot of winemakers out there, and there are a lot of ways to do things. So I'm not surprised if someone is doing a 3 or 4 month extended maceration and could possibly get something they really like. But I feel that usually within a month, I've gotten everything I need to get out of those skins, and it's time to press.
Thanks, Patrick. Hey, Patrick was talking about extended maceration before the really good questions from Donna and Phil. And after he makes that call to press the wine, that he's gotten that palate presence enough that we're seeking for conspiracy theory philosopher for all reds, then it's time for those skins and the juice to go into the press. Now, if you remember a few minutes ago, he talked about something called a pump over. How we pull the juice from the bottom of the tank, we pump it to the top because the carbon dioxide, if you remember back to the last episode, pushes all the skins up to the top. That's where all of our color and flavor are. So we're going to pump that juice from the bottom, trickle through that cap to extract color, flavor. Now, once we have that, then it's time for the press. And what we're going to do is we're going to put all of the skins in here. But the first thing we do is we are going to siphon out that juice at the bottom, and we call that juice free-run juice. Since it's not attached to the skins, it runs free. So we literally siphon that out, and we put that into a barrel where that is going to age. And then we toss the skins in here. And Sharath, if you kind of want to, this is a white wine you're about to see, but Sharath, if you want to fire up the video of us dumping the grapes in the press, same idea for white and reds. And what we do for the reds, when it's done, these are white grapes again, but for reds, once it's done fermenting, same thing's going to happen. We're going to take the skins out, and we're going to put them in the hopper at the top of the press. And then it's going to go inside, and you can see behind me and on the video that Sharath has, there's a cylindrical stainless steel kind of environment. And inside there, we have a canvas bag, so to speak. And then we have a computer on the side of the press, and we'll gently inflate the press at 0.2 bars interval. If you remember back to high school, what's a bar? It is 1 atmosphere, 14.5 pounds per square inch. So if we inflate the bladder at 0.2 bars, just over 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds per square inch on those skins. And then we will press it, and the juice will come out, and Patrick and the team will taste it. Because all of your color and flavors in the skin, when we press it, we're going to be extracting different flavors, different textures. And then we separate that juice. Then, once we've tasted that, we're going to fire up the press and increase the pressure to 0.4 bars. Taste that juice separately. 0.6 bars, 0.8 bars. The more we press the skins, the more tannic and structural integrity we're pulling out. Now, a few hours ago, we were pressing, one of the Cabernet, one of the interpretations of Cab for the Philosopher, one of the other wines for the lineup, and I pulled some of the free run. Well, we pulled all of them, but I kept the free run from that. And since we haven't pressed against these skins, although there's some structure on that from the grape itself, Cabernet Sauvignon, it's a little bit lighter, a little more berry driven. And then I saved the 0.4 bars of pressure since we've pressed those skins with, a little over 6 about 6 pounds of pressure. The tannins, which when you're tasting a red wine, they're responsible for the dryness you get on your tongue. I'm getting a lot more of that on the top of my tongue and on the sides of my cheeks. And now I have 0.8 bars, almost 1 atmosphere of pressure. That is chewy. The tannins are really powerful. I'm having kind of peanut butter mouth right now. But you can imagine if we're kind of blending those and playing with those, Patrick has a much bigger spice box with which to play to really control the palate presence that we're seeking. Now, once we get to about 1 bar, Patrick and the team are going to be really paying very, very close attention while tasting, because the one thing we do not want to do is break seeds. Because as you remember from previous episodes, there are seeds in the skins of the grapes. There are seeds on certain varietals we might use on the stems of the grapes. And there are also the skins, the stems, and the seeds. And the seeds have a lot of tannins. And if we break them, they will release a lot of bitter structure and flavors into the wine that won't complement what we're trying to do with that balance of fruit and structure. So that's why we're always isolating what we refer to as these press fractions, so that we have more pieces to play with to shape the wine we want. Then once we press it into barrel for aging, there's a little microbe, Enococcus ini, that Steve's going to talk to us about, which is going to change the character of the wine. You might have heard of something called malolactic conversion or malolactic fermentation. Malolactic is not a real word. You probably wouldn't find it in the dictionary. It's kind of a combination of things. And Steve, I see you're kind of staged over there. Can you talk to us about malolactic conversion?
Yeah, Stu, I sure can. I'm going to while I start this off, I'm going to taste some wine that is partway through malolactic conversion. This is our Petite Syrah that is the base of the conspiracy theory for the 2020 vintage. And let me just pull this out a little bit. This sample cock is a little tricky, so there we go. Yes, malolactic fermentation or malolactic conversion breaks down kind of exactly what it sounds like. There's malic acid in the grapes and in the juice. And if you think of malic acid, think of like biting into a green apple. That's full of malic acid. You're going to get that really kind of sharp, astringent type of bitterness. And we want to convert that oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, into lactic acid. Lactic acid is going to be creamier on the mouthfeel. Think milk, right? So with that, you'll hear a lot of people talk about malolactic conversion, especially in terms of Chardonnay, California Chardonnay in particular. They'll go through a full malolactic conversion or malolactic fermentation, oftentimes with certain Enococcus bugs like that Stu mentioned, where it's going to be driven more towards diacetyl, which is that buttery compound you're going to get in some California Chardonnays, like, what's the one? Rombauer, for example, is kind of a quintessential California Chardonnay. We make our style differently. We only go partial malolactic fermentation. And on whites and rosés, we go partial as well, but just a little bit. And we want some of that crisp acidity. We don't want it to be creamy. We want the wines to be kind of lighter, kind of spring, summer, kind of think outdoors, pool, barbecue type of things, especially in the Anarchist lineup. On the Foundry wine side, our Chardonnays will go a little bit further, but we never go all the way through for our styles. We want to have a little bit of malic acid still in there. Red wines, with the exception of Dolcetto or Beaujolais Nouveau, pretty much every other red wine is going to go all the way through. You don't want any malic acid left in the wine. And that's, basically it's really going to be an off-putting flavor. So Sometimes the wines will go through malolactic fermentation while they're going through primary fermentation. And also, sorry about this, I should have said, malolactic fermentation is also known as a secondary fermentation because it happens generally second after the primary being yeast eating sugar, creating alcohol and CO2, malolactic fermentation being the secondary fermentation. With that, we're going to go ahead and, we're going to go on the red wines, we want to go all the way through. Sometimes it goes through while it's going through primary, while it's in tank. Other times we're going to go through it after we press the wine. So after Stu just pressed the wine, we go into tank, let things settle down for another couple of days, get more solids out of the wine, and on any wine, whether it's white or rosé or red. And then we're after 2, 3, 4 days in tank, letting things settle out. Then we'll go into barreling it down. And usually we'll get that malolactic fermentation going. Sometimes it occurs naturally, and other times we have to inoculate for it, which is introducing the microbes into the wine to be able to do that conversion. And so when we are going to do that, it just depends on how far it goes. It's the winemaker's call. Patrick will determine whether to inoculate, when to inoculate. And then in that, we'll usually get into barrel and we'll go into a little bit of a warmer room. We call it the warm room, but it's really only about 6 or 8 degrees warmer than our barrel room, just to kind of keep those bugs active in the wine. And I know it doesn't sound very appealing when I say bugs in the wine, but that's kind of what we call them. So before we get into kind of oak, I don't know if there's any questions on that in particular, but we can also talk about the 2016 conspiracy theory. I've switched over to that. And before I get into the 2020 Petite Syrah base, let's just kind of check this out. So I'm getting ripe fruit. I'm getting really kind of ripe red fruits to it. A little bit of tobacco, a little spice, a little baking spice, a little chocolate, like a dark chocolate. Sorry for the sound as I slurp through that. That's actually intentional. If you go way back when we started doing these virtual sessions back in April, we talked about how to taste, and oftentimes you want to kind of pull oxygen through your mouth, kind of over your tongue, like that. Not the most appealing thing. A bunch of your friends might think you're kind of a little snooty about the whole thing, so I have to watch it when I do it, and just kind of casual times. But anyhow, yeah, I'm getting good tannins, good full fruit, mid palate's terrific, lingering finish. It's that's really good. And I think are Stu and Patrick situated over in the barrel room now? Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and introduce those guys back into the barrel room, and they're going to get into oak and the role of oak on the conspiracy theory, and we'll take it from there. Again, any questions, throw them in the Q&A, and we'll have them texted into us. Oh.
Hey, thank you, Steve. I did 2 major faux pas. You have a question coming in?
No, I don't have a question. I forgot to taste this Petite Syrah. Ooh, yum.
Oh, the PS?
Yeah.
The great
that's
Beatle tune, PS, I love you.
This was just pressed off a few days ago and just inoculated. So generally we'll inoculate for malolactic in tank and then barrel it down so that it's homogeneous and it gets in there, and then we'll barrel it down from there. So yeah, anyway, that's great. It's very sharp, very acidic, but the fruit on that is incredible. So anyway, go back to you, Stu. Back to you, Stu.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Steve. Snooty Steve with his slurping tendencies. I did. Steve alluded to it earlier. We have a cast of thousands helping us out tonight. Unfortunately, my camera person dropped the telephone. That would be me. And the other thing is, I hope you didn't notice when I smelled the wine with my mask on, also inhibiting some of the aromatic. I am outside and I'm standing at oak barrels. Oak barrel is going to play a really important piece to the aging of the wine and the aromas and the structure that Patrick's going to be kind of putting together with the conspiracy theory. So these wines have finished up malolactic conversion. I don't know if Patrick will be able to show us a two-part bung in the barrel room where he's allowing those gases to escape. But this is part of Conspiracy Theory 2020, and this element has finished up that process that Steve is talking about. And I'm going to thieve in here. I'm going to pour out this juice right here. And in the industry, we always refer to it as juice, even though it's wine. And now, the interesting thing about oak barrels is that the first 3 times that we use them, the first 3 times, you're going to pick up the characters that are released or pulled out of the wood on the nose and the palate. So we refer to a brand new barrel, like these bad boys. These are new oak. And you'll often see that on a bottle, right? Like 80% new French oak. So almost everything that we use here, Patrick will be able to chime in, but 97% of the wood that we use in our cellar is French oak, even probably higher than that. And then, and the first time we use it, it is new oak. And new oak can, like, it's amazing the characteristics it can bring. But new oak is not necessarily better because it can overpower that fruit element. So it's trying to find a balance. And now this wine is 6 weeks old. This is Syrah, which will be used. And I'm getting still a lot of berry fruit, but I'm already starting to pick up some of those sweeter notes that we can get. It's not sugar, but it's kind of this perceived sweetness, kind of like a confectionery note, almost like a butter or a butterscotch element that I'm getting. And even only a few weeks in, it's already picking that up because it is a new oak barrel. And then another interesting fact about this is we use about 13 different coopers. Coopers are the people who make the barrels because each cooper kind of brings different characters. So one cooper might be noted for kind of coffee notes. Another one might be noted for chocolate or butterscotch. And so when Patrick's assembling the wines, he's bringing in a little bit of this element, a little bit of that element. And then when we assemble them, that's where you get the layers. Incredible depth and complexity. Hey, Patrick, I'm going to kick it over to you. Could you kind of talk to us about, like, you know, these wines are about to age and you're in the barrel room. So, like, how long are you going to age Conspiracy Theory versus the Philosopher? And why do we age wines different lengths? Like, why is the Anarchist and the Rosé Against the Machine only aged for 4 months, where these wines are going to be going of upwards of 2 years? Patrick?
Yeah, that's a good question, Stu. And really, it does boil down to style. And so the thing about the Anarchist wine and the Rosé Against the Machine, we're now looking for an oak type of impact on those wines. We're looking for freshness and vibrancy and fruit and aromatics. We're trying to maintain as much of those as possible. So oak is only going to add more of the weight and complexity of oak compounds to that wine. So if you're looking for those things, and like on the Conspiracy Theory and Philosopher, we're looking for a good bit of those components. And so we want to age the Conspiracy Theory components for about 18 to 20 months or so in barrel. And so by about that point, you know, and generally it's Petit Syrah or Syrah or Sangiovese or Zinfandel, Syrah, the wines that we're using on that, they need about 14 to 20 months or so, depending on the amount of oak that you use on there and the style, again, you're looking for. And so Philosopher, which is mostly Cabernet based and Bordeaux varietal based, it needs a little bit more time, needs about 22 months of time, and that for almost 2 years of time sometimes for the tannins and profile and things to have enough time to gain the complexity and nuance and subtlety that we're looking for in the final wine. So you see here, well, this is a 2019 barrel of the Conspiracy Theory that we're aging now. It's been in barrel for about a year now. So we're a little over 50% of the way there. As you see, the Coopers are the name of is the barrel producer, is the maker, is the barrel chef, if you will. And so Vicard is the name of this particular Cooper. And it's a Bordeaux barrels, and all the, as Stu mentioned, I think it's higher than 97, Stu. I think it's closer to 100%, 99 and change percent French oak. And the reason is I think French oak is the best options that we have. And so it is the most expensive option also. You're looking at 850 euros per barrel for brand new barrels. So it's a very expensive endeavor. However, the quality you get from French oak, I think, is unparalleled. And so it's critical that we maintain the quality that we're looking for. And so here you have the card. They'll have a number of different ways that they'll mention in their number naming system inside that, but it's essentially, you're looking at a 150 to 200-year-old tree that grew in the center of France, planted in 1850, and grew for 150 years before it's cut down. And so the Unita has to be seasoned for 3 years, open to the elements, sitting in a lumber yard in the center of France, waiting to be crafted into a barrel. And finally, it's assembled and cut down to smaller lengths and staves, and then toasted over an open fire, and then finalized. And so here you see this beautiful craftsmanship, and it can't be replaced by trying to use oak adjuncts or alternatives. And so to me, there's no faking using the real stuff. And so it's critical, I think, in the final quality. If you're looking for the top-notch quality, you need to work with French oak, in my opinion. But you have to pay the price
Patrick,
in order to do that.
We have a question that comes in from. Are you going to do the question, Steve? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think they texted both of us. Yeah, so Cece and Franchuk in the Winelands, who I think is up pretty early. It's like middle of the night there in South Africa. Asking if anything other than oak would be acceptable, or are there any other kinds of wood used other than oak for making barrels?
And that's a great question. Thank you, CC. And I think that, my confidence on the French oak is a little bit, I don't want to be confusing to people. There are plenty of great wines that are made in different type barrels. In my opinion, particularly for the the best quality you can possibly get, I think French oak is the best. However, there's many oak trees that grow all over the world, and you can use, or other types of trees. Acacia, redwood has been used in the New World for many, many years. Here, particularly in California, has been used for a number of years. And especially if it's neutral, you gain very little of those qualities. And now, if you're looking for, acacia is another wood that's used, quite frankly, and it has quite a bit in different wines, and it has a significant difference of an impact. The question is what you prefer, what kind of impact you're looking for. American oak is totally different than French oak, and in that its profile, it gives different qualities. But acacia and cherry and cedar are all possible, and redwood are all possible woods that you could use. The question is, do you want those qualities in your wine? And that's something that you have to decide for yourself. And but there's many winemakers that are using woods of all types, not just oak. In my opinion, oak is the best choice to use as far as the woods that we have available. And I think French oak is the top of that list as far as the oaks that are available. But there are many different things that you could use, and it does boil down to the style and preference. And so it's hard to stereotype one thing as being the only right answer. In my opinion, it is the best answer. However, there are many answers that you could choose.
Thanks, Patrick. No. Well, actually, one more that I'm going to kick it to Stu, just since I'll be the facilitator of the question. But Stu, Keith from Galveston is asking about. He said he just got his 15 minutes of fame in his wine club shipment, and is asking if malolactic fermentation is something that happens on sparkling wines as well. You want to take that, Stu?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Well, so I'm going to say it depends, because the thing about sparkling wine is acidity. However, we are going to be on. I'm going to, how Patrick was kind of saying, it depends on what you want. So on sparkling wine, we usually want to highlight vibrant acidity. And so even though we're going to be aging the wine before we go into barrel, we might inhibit that malolactic conversion, the conversion of the sharp malic acids, think Granny Smith apple, to lactic acid, think dairy, so that we get some vibrancy in the palate. However, there can be complexity associated with allowing that to happen. You can get more nuance. And I think it's just going to be kind of a case-by-case basis. However, as Steve said, we often inhibit malo even on the grapes that you would associate with malolactic conversion in the traditional sense in, let's say, 2020, which would be Chardonnay. We're going to shut it down so we can have a little bit of bite from that green apple character and preserve that. And the way we shut it down is by hitting it with, introducing a small amount of sulfur dioxide to inhibit the conversion. It basically, it shuts down the bacteria. I hope that's a fair answer. But the answer is, it depends on what you're trying to do. Hey,
That's absolutely right, Stu. It really does. It does depend.
Yeah. And it's getting a little dark out here. I am not in the winelands. I am in the Napa Valley lowlands, actually, and the sun is about to set. Hey, Steve, any other questions?
No, I don't see any more coming through. Teresa hasn't shown me your phone, so I don't think there's any more questions. So I'm gonna, Stu, do you have anything else to add on the oak, or should we take it home?
No, I think oak is an important element, but don't overthink it. More oak is not necessarily better. It just depends on what your goal is for the wine. And that's the end of my answer.
Then, that's a great answer, Stu. You get an A. You get an A. And,
thank you,
Patrick. Patrick, your name's on the board with a check. But Stu, you get an A. So, all right, then I'm just going to say to everybody here, first of all, I'd like to just take this moment. This is our last virtual event, other than we do private virtual wine tastings where we send out wines and do them for groups and family members and all of that stuff. We've actually got a lot coming up for the holidays where people contact us, and you can reach out to taste@anarchistwineco.com, or if you're a club member and all the stuff, you get orders at anarchistwineco.com. You can reach out to us there for any of that stuff. And also, please be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and you'll see anything new that we're up to. We do intend to come back to the virtual world of awesomeness, but it'll be after the holidays and probably sometime in the winter. But I'd like to take a moment to thank our team here. It's been obviously a challenging year for everybody. And it's been a really warming from the bottom of my heart, how sensation really, I guess, how hard our team has worked, and even more so for all of you supporting us. You know, tasting room was closed for many months. We really had to kind of get things off on a great foot and figure out how to keep the brand going and revenue neutral and keep everybody's jobs afloat and all of that. And you've been a huge part of it. So thank you very much. For all of your support. Stu, Patrick, Philip, Teresa, Sharath, Val, who are all our kind of producers, co-producers on these events. Claire, who's helped us out a lot as well. Thank you guys so much. If you are into the Wine Foundry side of things, we are doing more crush camps where we'll next Wednesday on the 28th, as well as on Wednesday, November 11th. We'll have 2 installments, which will be kind of a broader and more in-depth description of what we went through tonight. So if you want to totally geek out with us, then we can do that. And November 18th is the next Wine Foundry book club. And the next book is called the something or other. Stu, you want to jump in and talk about that? Because I can't remember what it is. It's the something or other, but it's really cool. It's a graphic novel.
It's called Ode to Steve Ryan. And Steve doesn't like to talk about it, but it's his autobiography, which he wrote Kerouacian style on a single roll of paper. No, the book is called The Initiate, and it's really cool. A graphic artist who does graphic novels, comic books, wanted to learn about winemaking, and so he approached a winemaker and said, "Hey, will you teach me about winemaking, and I'll teach you how to draw comics." And the result is they created this graphic novel of teaching each other about winemaking and being an artist. So kind of a unique, interesting approach. The book group got into Forbes, got into a piece in Forbes, and for any book group, that's pretty crazy. But for a wine book group, that's really crazy. So Steve, thanks for bringing it up. We would love to have you aboard. And everybody, just want to, from the bottom of my heart as well, I just want to thank you very much. Look, we've got an important decision to make in a few weeks. Regardless, I just hope we treat each other with respect and dignity as we move forward. We're smart people. Let's act smart.
And if anybody has any
Cheers,
questions
Steve.
they were maybe a little intimidated to ask while we were on this, we will stay on for a few extra minutes and feel free to chat. We're going to go ahead and stop the record function now. That's you, Sharath, and everybody else drop off whenever ready. But thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. Cheers.